Somewhere along your journey, something cracked open. Maybe it was after a collapse that left you on the floor, or maybe after a moment of piercing clarity that split the old world in half. You saw through the masks, the endless chase, the illusions that kept life spinning. The noise quieted, and for the first time, there was silence. At first, that silence felt like liberation. It was vast, powerful, almost holy. For a while, you thought, this is it, this is freedom. But then something unexpected happened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, that silence thickened. The fire you thought would come never arrived. Instead, it was as if someone had turned down the volume on your entire existence and forgot to turn it back up. Things that once mattered, ambition, achievement, approval, no longer pulled you forward. You didn't care to chase them anymore. Not in a reckless, self-destructive way. More in a quiet sigh, like an old actor stepping off stage after realizing the play was never real. And in that stillness, a question began to echo louder and louder. Why do I feel numb now that I finally see the truth? We imagine awakening as a grand ignition, a blaze of meaning, a cosmic spark. But for many, especially those who feel deeply, who question endlessly, who carry the sensitivity of empaths and seekers, it doesn't come with fire. It comes with emptiness. I once watched a friend go through this exact unraveling. She was radiant in her seeking, bright, soulful, always quoting Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She had walked through her dark night of the soul and came out declaring that she had seen it all. She saw through ego, through false striving, through the illusions of identity. She said she felt awake for the first time in her life. And yet, only 2 months later, she was lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. I used to cry because I wasn't achieving enough, she whispered. Now I don't care if I achieve anything at all. I thought awakening would set me on fire. Instead, it's left me hollow. Carl Jung, long before the language of modern spirituality, knew this stage well. He spoke of it not as mystical, but as psychological. Enlightenment, he wrote, does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It sounds beautiful on paper. But to live it is another thing entirely. Because awakening, in practice, is not the end of a journey, it's the beginning of a kind of death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the structures that carried your meaning, your ambitions, your goals, your sense of time, even your relationships. One by one, the pillars that once held your life together crumble. And what is left standing? A self that is awake but anchorless. The ego has not disappeared, it has simply lost its map. Without a map, the compass of motivation spins aimlessly. You are not depressed in the usual sense. You are not broken or weak. You are in between. You've woken up from one reality, but you haven't yet awakened into another. You are suspended in limbo, hovering in a space that feels like nothingness. And here lies the paradox: this nothingness is not your downfall. It is sacred. Jung warned that the modern world does everything to avoid this stage, distracts us with productivity, entertainment, achievement, constant noise. But he also insisted that this stage is essential. This void, this pause, this uncomfortable emptiness, it is the soil of true transformation. Without it, there can be no individuation, no becoming of your deepest self. No one tells you about this part of the path. No one warns you that awakening will strip you down before it builds you up. That it will leave you empty before it fills you with something real. And so, when you find yourself staring into that hollowness, you mistake it for failure. You think something has gone wrong. But what if it is the most important step of all? To be emptied is to be made ready. To stand in the void is to stand at the threshold. You are not at the end of your awakening, you are at its sacred midpoint. You are in the quiet, terrifying, beautiful space where your old self has died, but your new self has not yet been born. And though it feels like loss, though it feels like numbness, one day you may look back and realize this pause was the greatest gift your soul ever gave you. Because it was here, in the silence, that you were stripped of everything false so that what is true could finally take root. There comes a moment on the path, unexpected, indescribable, when something inside you shifts. It doesn't always arrive with lightning bolts or trumpets. Sometimes it comes quietly, after a breakdown that leaves you hollow, or in the stillness that follows a sleepless night when you can no longer run from yourself. And in that moment, you see. You see through the chasing, through the masks you've been wearing, through the roles you've been rehearsing all your life. It's like realizing you've been in a play you never auditioned for, saying lines you never truly believed, dancing to a rhythm that was never your own. And when the curtain falls, there's silence. At first, that silence feels profound. It's freedom. The noise of the world, achievement, approval, endless striving fades into the background, and for a brief time you feel light, like you've been released from gravity. You walk differently. You breathe differently. You laugh at things that used to crush you. But then, slowly, almost without noticing, the silence changes. What was once liberation becomes heavy. Your passions fade, your goals lose their meaning, and the ambitions that once carried you no longer move you. Life feels muted, like someone turned the volume down on your soul. And so the question begins to haunt you: why do I feel so numb now that I finally see the truth? This is where so many seekers stumble, confused. We expect awakening to ignite us, to set our hearts on fire. Instead, it empties us. A dear friend of mine went through this. She had devoted her life to the spiritual path, reading Tolle, Watts, Krishnamurti, sitting in meditation circles, journaling her way through the storms of her heart. After months of darkness, she finally had her breakthrough. She told me she saw it all: the illusion of ego, the falseness of striving, the masks of identity. She was radiant with realization. But 2 months later, she sat across from me hollow-eyed, staring at the floor. I used to cry because I wasn't achieving enough, she whispered. Now I don't care if I achieve anything at all. I thought awakening would fill me with fire. Instead, I feel like ash. Carl Jung, long before spiritual awakening became a hashtag, knew this stage intimately. He wrote, "Enlightenment does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Beautiful words, but living them is not romantic. Awakening is not the finish line. It is the death of the map you've been following. The ego, your sense of identity, the voice that once whispered, "Do more, prove more, become more," suddenly collapses. The fuel that drove you for years no longer works. The dreams and goals carefully stitched together by your old self now feel like clothes that don't fit. You've stepped off stage mid-performance, the mask has fallen from your face, and the script in your hands reads like a foreign language. That's why motivation disappears. Not because you're lazy, not because you're failing, but because you've outgrown the very engine that powered your drive. Jung believed this is where the deeper self begins its work. The ego is not destroyed, it is stripped of its throne. Beneath it, something larger waits. He called this process individuation, the slow, painful, sacred journey of becoming whole. Not the small self craving applause, but the self rooted in truth. But here's where many falter. Some stop here, drifting into a kind of spiritual numbness. They say, nothing matters. It's all an illusion. They confuse detachment with disengagement. They float above life, untethered. But Jung would call this a trap. Because the self does not want to escape the world. It wants to incarnate through you. To reach that, you must pass through the in-between, the phase no one puts on Instagram. It doesn't look like blissful meditation retreats or golden sunsets. It looks like sitting in silence while the world rushes past, unable to explain why you don't care about doing anymore. Jung had a word for this, enantiodromia. The swinging of the pendulum into its opposite. After years of ego-driven striving, the pendulum swings to soul-level stillness. From "I must do everything" to "why do anything?" And though it feels like loss, it is actually balance returning. The ancients knew this stage too. They called it the hermit's path, the death before rebirth. It is the caterpillar dissolving into formless goo inside the cocoon. And yes, goo doesn't hustle. Goo doesn't chase goals. Goo doesn't get likes. Goo only dissolves. This is when the ego panics. It claws for direction, for identity, for proof of progress. But in the stillness, the self whispers, "Be patient. Something deeper is being built." Modern spirituality often sidesteps this stage. It says high vibes only, or follow your joy. But Jung would insist, if you skip the darkness, you skip the gold. It is here, in the silence, in the emptiness, that the unconscious finally rises. The shadows you repressed, the parts of yourself you avoided, they surface now. Not to punish you, but to be integrated. This is not extra credit. This is the curriculum of becoming whole. So when you find yourself in this pause, this sacred nothingness, don't mistake it for failure. You are not broken. You are metabolizing. You are dissolving. You are being remade. The world will call it laziness. You will call it numbness. But Jung would call it transformation. And one day, when the cocoon opens, you'll see that this pause, the silence, the emptiness wasn't the absence of your awakening. It was the womb of it. It usually begins with a spark. A breakdown, a breakthrough, a moment where the curtain lifts and you see life for what it really is. The noise, the endless chasing, the illusions, they all fall away. For a while, it feels like freedom. Like standing on the edge of the world and finally breathing for the first time. You tell yourself, this is it. This is what I've been searching for. But then, something unexpected happens. The high fades. The silence grows heavy. And the meaning you thought you'd finally found begins to dissolve. It doesn't collapse all at once. It drifts away quietly, like mist disappearing in the morning sun. Suddenly, the things that once mattered, ambitions, success, even relationships, don't move you anymore. It's not that you don't care. It's that caring feels impossible. You wake up one morning and realize the fuel that used to push you through life, achievement, recognition, approval, no longer works. Your old fire has burned out. And you're left wondering, why do I feel so numb now that I finally see the truth? This is the paradox of awakening. Everyone tells you it will set you free, fill you with joy and purpose. But no one warns you that sometimes, it empties you instead. I once spoke with a friend who went through this. She had read all the spiritual masters, Tolle, Watts, Krishnamurti, and after her dark night of the soul, she said she finally got it. She saw through the ego, through the constant striving. For a moment, she felt liberated. But 2 months later, she was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to move. She whispered to me, I used to cry about not achieving enough. Now I don't care if I achieve anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up. Not leave me like this. And that's when I realized what she was describing was something Carl Jung had warned about long ago. He understood what happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. He once wrote, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It sounds beautiful, until you live it. Because making the darkness conscious feels like a kind of death. The death of who you thought you were. The collapse of the structures that once gave you meaning, your career, your identity, your goals, even your sense of time. But here's the thing, your ego doesn't actually disappear. It just loses its map. It doesn't know how to function anymore. And without that map, motivation disappears. You're not broken. You're in between. You've woken up from something, but you haven't yet woken up into something else. This in-between space feels like a void. And in our world, we hate the void. We label it laziness, depression, failure. But Jung believed this space was sacred. It's not the end of the journey, it's the threshold of becoming. He even had a word for it, enantiodromia. The swing of opposites. You've spent years striving, running, proving yourself. And so the pendulum swings the other way, into stillness, into nothingness. From I must do everything to why do anything at all? It's the cocoon stage. The caterpillar dissolves into goo, no longer what it was, not yet what it will be. And in that goo phase, there is no roadmap, no checklist, no clarity. Just dissolution. Most people resist this stage. They try to run back to the old life, to cling to their old fire. Or they bypass it with fake positivity, telling themselves it's all an illusion, so nothing matters. But Jung warned against this. Because skipping the darkness means skipping the gold. The void has a purpose. It's there to stall you, to strip away the false fuel you've been running on. To make you face what you've buried. To force you to slow down and listen to the parts of yourself you've ignored. And when you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to force clarity and achievement, something strange happens. Slowly, a new kind of motivation begins to emerge. It doesn't come as fireworks or lightning bolts. It comes as whispers. A quiet pull in your chest. A resonance with something simple and honest. This is what Jung called the emergence of the self, not as a theory, but as a living compass inside you. The self doesn't care about status or performance. It doesn't need validation. It wants only truth. Expression. Alignment. And this new fire feels different. It's not anxious or restless. It's steady, like an underground river. It moves you not because you're chasing, but because you're remembering. You begin to ask different questions, not what should I do? But what's calling me? Not how can I prove myself? But what feels honest right now? And life becomes less about controlling, and more about participating. Less about climbing ladders, and more about following threads. You start noticing synchronicities, dreams, intuitions, subtle signs guiding you forward. Jung called this the symbolic life. And here's the beautiful twist, this path often looks ordinary. You might not be meditating on mountaintops or sharing profound insights online. Instead, you're creating quietly, saying no to what doesn't fit, saying yes to what resonates, choosing peace over performance. But this ordinary is extraordinary because it's real. It's sustainable. It's soul-powered. Awakening, then, isn't about going back to your old fire. It's about letting that fire die so a deeper flame can rise. A flame that doesn't flicker when the winds of life blow. A flame that doesn't need applause to burn. And maybe that's the point. Awakening isn't the end of your story. It's the end of pretending. It's the beginning of your becoming. So if you've been drifting in the fog, feeling unmotivated, wondering if you're lost, you're not. You're dissolving, so you can be rebuilt. You're not failing. You're transforming. And when the time comes, you won't need to push. You'll just know. Your whole being will say yes.